Hello, I'm Robert Emmett Hernan. I'm the head of BlueStack Productions Inc., the publisher of Irish Environment, an online magazine for environmental matters on the island of Ireland. We're here today in another of our series of conversations with Peter Lehner, Executive Director of the Natural Resources Defense Council. Peter, you're very welcome.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Peter, would you explain to the audience what the NRDC, or the Natural Resources Defense Council, is and what it does?
Sure. NRDC is one of the U.S.'s largest environmental advocacy groups. We have about 1.3 million members around the United States and really around the globe. We have a staff of about 400 lawyers, scientists, economists, policy specialists, and others who mobilize our activists and help educate the public. And fundamentally, we're here to try to get better environmental policies, better environmental laws, better environmental regulations, make sure those laws and regulations are enforced, and we get better public health.
And how many staff members are there with NRDC?
We've got about 400 right now. We've got offices, we're based in New York. We've got pretty big offices, obviously, in Washington. We have an office in the Midwest in Chicago, a small office in Livingston, Montana, where we do a lot of wildlife work for the greater Rockies area. Offices in San Francisco and LA, and one in Beijing.
And it's 40 years ago that you started, the same year as Earth Day.
We did. 40-year anniversary this year. We started, and it's not a coincidence that NRDC was formed the same year as the first Earth Day. We were really formed as part of the same movement. We were formed to enforce those new environmental laws that were just getting passed, to make sure that those laws always were being watched over by a group of experts dedicated to the public interest rather than to the polluter's interest.
And now the Beijing office, when did you open that office?
We opened that about 3.5 years ago, but we've actually been working in China out of a lot of suitcases for about 12 years before that.
Are there other environmental organizations from the U.S. operating in China or from Europe?
There are some, but most of the bigger American environmental groups working in China are more of the wildlife type groups, the Nature Conservancy or the World Wildlife Fund. And we're really by far the largest, focusing on pollution and energy type issues as opposed to wildlife issues.
And how many staff members do you have in Beijing?
Well, it varies. We've got about 25 staff, but because it's such a popular spot, we often have anywhere between 1 and 5 or 7 volunteers who are sometimes lawyers or engineers or graduate students who want to come and work with us for a year.
And these are Chinese volunteers?
Some are Chinese, some are American, both. Most of our staff are Chinese nationals. We have a handful of Americans, but a fair, I think 4 or 5 or so.
And you need a special permit or permission from the Chinese government to operate?
You do. It's different. Of course, in the United States, you have to work to get your tax-exempt status as a not-for-profit organization. In China, it's a little different the way we operate. We don't sue the government there as we do here. That's a mainstay of what the NRDC does in the United States. But in China, we are really much more acting as a trusted advisor to the government to try to bring our expertise in energy efficiency, in clean energy, in clean production processes, and in environmental law to the Chinese government.
Now, I thought we would talk about where your sense is of where China is and where it's going. And I know that there was a lot of criticism of China after the Copenhagen meeting, especially from the British. But we all see that they're mending fences now. The recent meeting with Connie Hedegaard from the European Commission on Climate Action and this new environmental climate change hotline between China and the EU, which is all a very helpful sign. What's your sense of where they are and where you think they're going to be going over the next couple of years in terms of climate change policies and procedures?
Well, I'm frankly pretty hopeful. I think China is taking climate change pretty seriously right now. I think there was a very important step forward made at Copenhagen, even though Copenhagen often is viewed as not that successful because we didn't get the global agreement that we wanted to. We view it as pretty successful because the US and the China agreed to a certain amount of openness, particularly with the Chinese program, where they would report according to guidelines, international guidelines, and those guidelines can be developed, and there will be monitoring and some verification. And that issue of transparency, of really being able to trust what the Chinese are doing, I think President Obama knew was a critical issue for the United States. When I go up to the U.S. Senate to lobby for a climate bill in the U.S. Senate, I often hear concerns about China. And one of the concerns is, how do we know what China's really doing if they are so closed, if they if they're not more transparent? So by this agreement between the U.S. and China, I think will be very important to help at least eliminate one barrier in the U.S. Senate to getting a comprehensive climate bill. There are other challenges, and we're working hard and to get that bill through the Senate, and of course that's changing almost daily between Senator Graham and the Gulf oil spill.
But China is a major 500-pound gorilla in the closet on that conversation about climate change.
China is a big player, and what we found is that they're taking a number of steps between energy efficiency of their industrial sector, their building sector, their transportation sector, moving very rapidly in clean energy. They're looking at carbon sequestration of their coal emissions, and they're really taking it pretty seriously. One of the things that the Chinese clearly get, and frankly I sometimes wish the US Congress would get it a little better, is that the same pollution sources, largely coal-fired power plants, that cause global warming also cause acid rain, also cause local smog, mercury emissions affect the neurological systems and the IQ of all of us. Coal creates a mess when you mine it, and the coal ash can create a mess when you dump it. So China recognizes that by moving to clean and efficient energy, they have an opportunity to address not only climate change, but also a whole raft of other pollution problems that they have to take very seriously. Even the Chinese government's numbers are that several 100,000 people every year are dying because of pollution issues. And pollution is also causing some civil unrest as waters are contaminated, as drinking water becomes unsafe or unusable even for irrigation. So there's popular interest in cleaning things up as well.
And we certainly saw that sensitivity in the Olympics, where they tried to clean up the air as well as they could.